Hello, and welcome to the second of our series of recordings on Introduction to TrueLoad. This video today will be working with TrueLoad pretest and laying gauges on an FEA model. So let's get right into it. As you can see here, I have navigated in Windows Explorer to the folder where my results are. In this example, these happen to be ANSYS RST files are here, and we're going to start with this folder here. So in the address bar on the top here, what I want you to type in is TrueLoad app, just like this, and press enter. That will launch the TrueLoad application. And then when the TrueLoad application is open, let's just make it go full screen. And then let's go into pretest. It's the second icon on the main toolbar there. So let's just click on pretest. And you'll see the main pretest form opens up. And you'll notice that there's a TLD file, which is the TrueLoad file, and an FEA database. We need to start with an FEA database because we're starting from scratch here. So we're just going to come here now and browse for the FEA database. And the filter by default is set for Abacus, but we're just going to change the filter to be ANSYS binary results files. And you'll see our RST files show up here. And I'm going to click on headlamp gloads. This is my example here. And then we're going to just click the next button over, and that's going to load the FEA model into the session. And you can see in the background the FEA model came in. And now you can see that I've got my load table down below and a drop down of all the different load cases on the model. And I'm just going to click the add row to the event button, and I'm just going to click that 3 times, and it's going to add each one of them one by one. So there's our three events, our 3 loads into the load table here. So these are actually X, Y, and Z acceleration loadings on the model. And then let's go and select candidate elements for placing strain gauges. So we're going to need to select elements that are going to be places that we're going to allow TrueLoad to place gauges on. So what we're going to do here is click the Select Elements button, and then you see the selection toolbar comes up on the bottom of the main screen. And I'm going to press down with the Shift key, and just shift and drag, and you'll see that I've selected these elements here. And then I'm going to zoom in on the legs in the bottom down here, and I'm going to get some of these elements down here. So I'm going to shift and drag, and the selection, it's got to be an all-in selection. So it only takes the elements that are all inside my selection here. And by holding the Shift key, I'm adding to the selection. So I got those, and I'm going to grab these. And just as an example, if I grabbed too many, if I grab these here and I don't want them, I can then press the Control key and shift and drag and unselect them. So Shift adds to the selection, Control removes from the selection, and no modifier, just a regular pick or click and drag that replaces the selection with your current. So this kind of works like Windows, like selection in Windows. Okay. So we've got these elements selected here. I'm just going to click Complete to tell TrueLoad that those are the elements I want. And it says that we've got 236 elements picked. All right. And now at this point here, I'm pretty much ready to go. And just to save the work I've put in here, I'm going to just save this file. So I'm going to save this file as headlamp. So headlamp, I'm going to spell it like that, and just click Save. All right. So now we've got all our selections and our load table saved. But right now we don't have any gauges laid on this model. So in order to do this, we're going to go through and just come on the bottom part of the form here where it says gauge placement, and you'll see that there's an icon down here next to the gauge spinner that says find gauge locations. So we're just going to click that, and TrueLoad's going to go off and find 3 strain gauges that satisfies these 3 unit load conditions here. And what you'll see is that we've got 3 strain gauges drawn up on the part here, and TrueLoad basically identifies strain gauges on the main load pass on the structure. So you'll see that the legs are the areas that are getting it most. And there's plots being set up here and shown with our gauges, and we'll talk about this in 1 minute. Let's go through and add a few more gauges here. So we've got 3 load cases for 3 strain gauges for 3 load cases. Good practice is to have 1.5 to 2 times the number of gauges. So I'm going to come in and ask for 6 gauges, and if I click this button, Find New Gauges, it's going to throw away the gauges it found and go find me 6 brand new ones. And if I click the next button over, that says Find More Gauges, and what that's going to do is going to leave the 3 we've got alone and find me 3 more new ones. Either is fine. The latter is better if you've done some gauge editing and you don't want to mess anything with your existing gauges. And now you can see that it found more gauges on the legs and it put one up here on the lamp. So let's go in and take a look at these a little bit. Okay. So these gauge placements are fine, but I like to move things around a little bit on this model, and I like to put them in different locations. And the way I'm going to do that now is I'm going to do that with Tweak and Swap. So this icon here, the third one over, is a Tweak and Swap Gauges. And I'm going to click on that, and we're going to get another little form here. And I can pick a gauge and pick an element and swap it over. So it'll go pretty straightforward. I can either do it through the drop-down menus here. If I use the drop-downs, I've got to highlight the gauges with these buttons over here. If I just pick, they highlight automatically. So I'm just going to come here and pick. And I'm going to pick that gauge there. You see it got highlighted. And I'm going to pick this element here, and that got highlighted, and I'm going to move it over, okay? And I'm going to do that a couple more times. I'm going to pick this gauge here, this element here, move it over, and I'm going to pick this gauge over here, and I want to move it up here to this element here, and then this button here swaps it. And oh, look at that, it came in at a funny orientation. I don't like this orientation here. So while this gauge is still highlighted, I can come down here to the tweak buttons here, and I can spin it to be at the orientation I want. So this is the orientation I want for this gauge. Let's look at the other side here and see what's going on there. Oh boy, this gauge isn't right either. So I'm going to just select this gauge here, and now tweak that over. And because the local element coordinate system isn't quite square to the world, it doesn't line up in a nice factor for me. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set my angle increment down to 1. And I'm just going to be very careful. Okay? And there's my orientation I want. Now if we take a look at this, I like these gauge placements. This is what I want. We're gonna click the button on the top right here. This says update the EMAT. What this is going to do, it's going to go and calculate new strain responses along these vectors of these gauges here and update our correlation matrices. So when I'm going to click this button, it's going to make these changes permanent. And then I just need to close out this form, and it will do some scaling updates as well. And now we've got our gauges placed. So that's about as simple as it gets. Okay, so now we've got our gauges placed. Just for good luck, I'm going to save the TLD file. This is our gauge placements and our correlation matrix. We've laid gauges on an FEA model that are sensitive to our 3-unit load cases here. Let's do a few things to take a look at what's going on. Number one, let's look at the, let's just do some animations of our unit load shapes here. So I'm going to click this Animate Strings button under Session Tools. And I'm going to get a pop-up here, and I'm just going to click Animate Strings. And so here's load case 1 is basically this gravity load in the X direction. If I go to load case number 2 and animate that, that's going to be gravity load in the Y direction. And if I go to load case number 3, that's going to be a gravity load in the Z direction. Okay, so those are the 3 load cases that our strain gauges are sensitive to. Okay, so that's what we just did. And then finally, we're going to do a simulated test case, And the simulated test case is going to line us up for our next portion of work for post-test. And so what we're going to do is we're going to leverage the work we did in the previous video, and we're going to use a QSE file. So I'm going to come back here, down at the bottom here for event simulation, and we're going to grab that QSE file. So try one QSE, open that up, and then I'm going to click Generate Strains, and if I make this window bigger, if I make this window undocked and bigger. So what we're seeing here is we're seeing the 6 gauges, and we're seeing the strain response in the 6 gauges due to that quasi-static event that we made in the last video, which we had 2 sine waves and a random. So these are the strain responses on these gauges here. So the strain responses aren't great; they're plus or minus 40 microstrain. But since this is simulated, I'm okay with this, and we're going to use this. Okay. So what's happened then is that we've got these simulated strains that were generated from that other event, the time history of strains here, and they were written to this CSV file. We will use this in the next video to recover the original functions on the structure. Okay. With that, that's it. This is just a very quick introduction to gauge placement using true load pretest, and this is what we've done. And I'm going to close this up today with a report generation. So report generation is something I like to do to just document where we've been. And we do this with this button down here, which is generate the report file. It's going to create an HTML file. And when I do this, it's going to go through and create animations. And on the video, I'm going to edit some of the time out of the video because right now, saving these animations to an AVI file is a little bit on the slow side. And in the future, we're going to speed this up. But right now, it's a little slower than I'd like it to be. So when you watch this video, you'll see that I will have edited some of the time out. And the HTML report is just finishing up. And in 1 second, it'll be open up in the browser. And we'll show you what that looks like. So here's the HTML report as generated. So what you'll see is the date and time when you've created this, a lot of the information about the files. Here's our 3-unit load cases, and these little hyperlinks then will be animations for those unit load cases. So you can show those to your friends and family. Okay. And then there's just standard plots that we've been looking at. And I haven't gone through what these graphs are in this short video, but this is actually showing that we've got a very, very well-behaved system. There's our simulated strain response in the gauges, and then standard views of your part. Okay, and now with that, that's the end of our video for today. The next one, we're going to go into post-test and reconstruct the loads from these strains that we measured off our part. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye.